Testing, 1, 2, 3. City of Vancouver, what do you have to say today? Hey guys, this is Editing Sabrina here, popping in to say hi. I hope you enjoy this video, but I'm so sorry because I'm an idiot and did not realize that my mic was just not working. So the entire video audio is being recorded from like my camera's mic. I'm so sorry. This won't happen next time, but I was not going to re-record everything. So I hope this sounds okay. I put a lot of thought into this video, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Hey guys. Guess what? It's 2021 and cinema is officially dead. But I don't really want it to be. So I'm here today to try and manifest some fresh, new, original movie-making energy for 2021 because apparently Hollywood execs don't have a single creative concept to pull out of their asses right now, and so they need me, a young, passionate, talented, beautiful, underpaid, and underrepresented minority woman to do it for them. But maybe I should introduce myself first. My name's Sabrina, this channel is called Realism, and today I plan to be unpacking what the hell happened to movies in 2020 and what I hope will change because of it. Just a full disclaimer before we continue, I am based in Canada. That means this video's perspective is going to be very North American, American-centric. In the future, I do hope to share with you my thoughts about movies all around the world because the movie industry is not just about Hollywood, but for today it is. "2020, the year of our Lord Corona, did quite a number on the film industry. Obviously, you know, movie theaters had to be shut down, a lot of productions were halted, major releases were postponed, and the big takeaway was Hollywood lost a lot of money. Ultimately, though, the industry had to adapt, right? So here we are now in the early days of 2021, and the current state of things is kind of back to normal. Some movie theaters are open, depending on where you are, with limited capacity, and a lot of movie premieres now are either just straight to VOD or streaming, or they're doing this two-prong method where you have the option to go and view it at the theater, or you can rent it from home. Honestly, I'm kind of okay with this trend, especially the one where you have the option to go to the theater or to watch it at home at the same time. I like that, and I think that should stick around. But besides the obvious changes in how we're watching our movies, what I really want to talk about today is what this might mean for how movies are made, their production, their budgets, even their content moving forward. What happened to movies in 2020 ultimately shows us that the direction we were going with the way Hollywood makes their movies, distributes it, it's so unsustainable. For example, let's take the movie theater industry. A lot of their profits are dependent on mainly two things: the selling of big ticket box office premieres from your studios like Disney, Marvel, Pixar, which I guess are all Disney now, and their concessions. So now, because of coronavirus, we don't have that. We don't have big event films where crowds are gonna go to the midnight premiere and pay a bunch of money to watch the movie. That's not happening anymore. I think this is a good and a bad thing because obviously that whole experience of going to the movie theater it's priceless. But at the same time, movie theaters, like the big guys that are able to get the licensing monopolies over big ticket film premieres. As a result, they weed out smaller independent theaters that otherwise would be able to screen more obscure, more indie, and more like experimental films to the regular audience. That whole system kind of eats away at the artistic integrity of how we screen movies. At the core, I think the problem with movies lately is, I guess, like two things. One is there's just this crazy amount of content and a lack of originality. Chronic remakes are being made. Studios are feeding into nostalgia in a really unmeaningful way. It's really just to get money from us. I've heard some people say things like, we're in the golden age of streaming right now. That's good in some ways, but in other ways, it's led us to just have the ability to create content upon content, and it's recyclable and it's disposable and it's not memorable content. It's not something you would go and tell your friends that you watched and be like, hey, you should watch this movie. It changed my life. It changed my worldview. Or it made me feel something. Like, when was the last time that happened? Sure, we're still getting films that do that here and there, but that's, again, the point is that's not the general trend. That is the exception right now. And that's why I'm here, still talking, because I'm trying to manifest a new golden age in movie making. I think we have all the right pieces in place for that to happen. You see, the thing is, something like this has happened before, where movie theaters were in decline. There was a lack of originality in filmmaking, and there was a general sense that films needed a little bit more of a rebellious hit to them. Home viewing and television were at its peak. What I'm referring to is an era in filmmaking around the 1960s and 1970s where a lot of creative risks were taken in films at pretty low costs. This era became known to a lot of people as the American New Wave or New Hollywood. Even if you're not really familiar with the terms American New Wave or New Hollywood, you definitely are familiar with the movies that came out of this era. The climate which set up the American New Wave to happen was really similar to kind of where we are now, which is why I think we're due for a new wave. Now, what were the things that set up the American New Wave to happen? Well, sit back, my film students, because we're going to have a little history lesson now. Basically, there were 4 things that had to happen for the American New Wave to be cemented. The decline of the studio system, the rise in television and home viewing, political turmoil, and a new generation of educated and rebellious filmmakers. Let's start with the decline of the studio system. Back in the 1930s, the Hollywood studio system dominated the film industry with 5 major studios. They were MGM, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and RKO. This era was known as Classical Hollywood. So what really defined the studio system was the monopoly that they had over everything, from the production to the distribution and even to the exhibition of their films. While a lot of great films and filmmakers were born out of this generation, in general, a lot of the films tended to follow a certain formulaic narrative, and they were made for easy watching by a large audience. It wasn't really a welcoming environment for avant-garde experimentation or anything like that. And today we're seeing a really similar studio domination of the film industry, mainly by Disney. That's because Disney owns like everything now. Okay, so let's talk about the second factor. This was the rise in television and home viewing. In 1948, a very important US Supreme Court case happened. This was called the United States versus Paramount Pictures. This case basically concluded that the major studios were in violation of antitrust laws because of their monopoly over their studios and movie theaters. The major studios were forced to sell their movie theaters and only be involved in the production and distribution process. This was a way to separate theater screenings from the studios as a way to even out the playing field a little more and give more opportunities for smaller studios and independent filmmakers. Not too long after the majors lost their monopoly on the film industry, television was introduced and became increasingly a more common household system for Americans. This, coupled with an economic recession and the suburban migration, meant that more people were staying at home and choosing to watch TV rather than pay to go out and watch movies. Today, this is also happening with the general trend of technology making it easier and much more convenient to stay at home and watch your movies and television from the comfort of your own bed, coupled with the rising cost of living and now the global pandemic. All of these have really cemented this golden age of streaming. Now let's talk about political turmoil. In the 1960s, America was wrought with the Vietnam War effort and civil rights movements at home. Anyone growing up in this generation would see such major cultural and political shifts. Of course, it would be reflected in their art, music, television, film, literature, everything. Similarly now, we've been experiencing this rise in radical politics, fake news, heightened racism. While the likes of war and inequality are not commendable aspects of life by far, they do breed an environment for, honestly, just really evocative, radical, and meaningful art. And finally, the last ingredient to our secret recipe for the American New Wave: the people who make the films. In the 1960s, a new generation of filmmakers were entering the field. This generation was freshly graduated, they were film educated, generally middle to upper class, and disillusioned with just the turmoil that they experienced as adolescents. As a result, they wanted to make film that was critical about the world around them. This generation is now lovingly known as the film school brats. At this point, the idea of a big budget studio blockbuster film was very risky. Studios were more willing to take creative ganders at lower budgets, and because they made films at lower budgets, that meant that their profit margins were a lot easier to make back. So naturally, the film school brats went off, made movies for these film studios, and this was American New Wave. The films out of this era are generally more experimental, visually striking. They tended to be influenced by European cinema and the French New Wave, and they often dealt with darker, more cynical themes than classical Hollywood did. As one of my professors put it, the American New Wave was a time when an aesthetically experimental, socially conscious auteur could coexist with the blockbuster mentality. Sadly, this couldn't exist for long. Interestingly, one of the film school brats who made a lot of films during the New Hollywood era also took a big part in ending that era. In 1975, Jaws was released. Jaws showed studios that films could be an investment. They could be planned from pre-production to post-exhibition to essentially be cash cows that they could milk dry. Marketing strategies, merchandising, branding, film franchising, all these ideas were born from the success of Jaws and subsequent hits like Star Wars. These massive films did so well in the box office that naturally everyone tried to replicate their success over and over and over again. And here we are today. Until, of course, 2020 happened. Coronavirus hits the world, movie theaters are shut down, and we see major studios scrambling to decide how are we gonna make our money back on our $200 million budget film? Let's charge $30 to rent it. The films which traditionally had to depend on massive initial box office revenue from their theater ticket sales, they can't exist sustainably anymore. There's no way you're going to make back over $200 million from your production budget by having your film go straight to VOD or have it be rented out for $30 a piece. So what is Hollywood gonna do now? What are you gonna do, Hollywood? You're gonna listen to me. Because I have some advice for you. Put more money into low to mid-tier budget indie cinema. No more Wonder Woman, no more Tenet, no more Birds of Prey, no more like super McDonald franchise man, okay? Try to make some good old classic art. So what does my humble self make of all of this? Well, I can see two major things happening to the film industry this coming year. First of all, streaming services are going to be relied on so much more for their revenue capabilities and definitely will overtake the theater box office, at least while lockdowns are in place and it's generally safer to watch from home than to go to the theater. I wonder if streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max will have to start reporting like box office revenue like theaters do, because right now they don't, and that sort of information can be useful and really interesting too. Second, and most importantly, I think, low to mid-tier budget films. We don't really need any more of these $200-300 million budget films that are meant to be blockbuster hits. That's not something people have the capability to safely go and attend a fun group viewing at. And so far, it's not been really artistically fulfilling either. Now, I don't want to be overly optimistic and have this come bite me in the ass later. I think we're entering a time in filmmaking history that is parallel to the American New Wave in the 1960s. And I just really hope that another golden age for Hollywood indies is nigh upon us. We have all the pieces for a new wave in place, right in front of us, you know? Just like then, TV and home viewing is at its peak. Movie theaters are suffering with an outdated system. And there are plenty of young, intelligent, passionate, talented filmmakers that are just egging to make the types of movies that will be remembered for ages and tell the types of stories that we have yet to hear. I think we're just overdue for a new wave of originality, diversity, nothing performative, nothing just there for money, just for the sake of making a movie and getting the views. You have the money and the resources. Make something meaningful. Let's do that in 2021. Well, that's the end of my video. Thank you if you made it this far. I'm sorry about the insane amount of lighting changes that happened. The sun, she's a independent, strong woman who I cannot control, but she gives us life, so I'm not complaining about her. This was the first video on my channel. If you have any of your own opinions to share about what I talked about today, please let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, take care and stay safe and keep watching the movies you love.